This channel is supported by truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I think you're probably very aware of this idea that guitarists, because you probably heard us talk about it, are getting asked more and more to go to sort of direct solutions and not bring amps to gigs. And I wanted to do a video kind of on this, just like, because I did a gig last night and the sound limit on the place was something like 85 dB according to their website, and I then was thinking, like, is this like a cheap place to book? Because there was like no proper driveway, it was just literally a barn in the middle of a field, and I looked at how much they're charging for hire for the day. It's like $5,000, and I thought something doesn't seem quite right about that when it's like you can't even have the band playing above 85 decibels allegedly. It's kind of a bit of a, I don't know. So the question for me is, like, if there's no amps allowed, what's the point? And to me, I think it seems to me like this is trying to get a band to play in a scenario where actually everyone in the surrounding area would prefer there not to be a band. In that case, kind of, wouldn't you be better off just having a DJ or something like that? So yes, the venue yesterday, there was specifically in the notes, like, don't bring an amp, and I was going to take, instead of an amp, because I knew it was going to be quiet, I was going to take an FRFR speaker, but to people those look the same as an amp, so I thought, well, actually I'm probably just going to have nothing on stage. And even the sound guy, so Paul, who does sound, is a guitar player as well. He was like, it's just a bit weird because there was an electric kit as well. So he sat behind the speakers, and then you're sat behind the speakers. There's just like no real noise particularly. You're just hearing like the sound of the band sort of bouncing back if you're sat behind the subs and the speakers. It's a bit of a weird scenario. The other thing that was kind of interesting was just before, or maybe just after I was taking a solo, the crowd was sort of shouting. This doesn't happen often, by the way, but go John or whatever. And it was kind of quite off-putting because the crowd was like so loud relative to the volume of the band. It sort of felt like being in the Beatles, but with, you know, 3 people screaming at you. But yeah, it was a bit of a, that was odd. I have gigged with an electric drum kit before in one of these scenarios where it's a venue which is not really supposed to be a venue. So like the venue we were yesterday, they said that they'd had police complaints the last time they had a gig. So they're really begging bands to play like at quieter volumes. And I just think in that case, if it's like that serious, wouldn't it be better just to say, look, you can have maybe certain types of bands would make sense, but like a rock band that most, you know, like most function bands, not most function bands, but most function bands that I've played in would be kind of like rock bands. But there are things like a jazz trio or, you know, you think of, there's folk type stuff or acoustic bands, or definitely ensembles where it would be easy to have lower volume stuff. If you involve a drummer with a real drum kit, then that's, I think, where volumes start to get higher. So the electric drum kit does help solve for some of that, but I still feel like that in that case, when you're hearing rock tunes like Teenage Dirtbag or Mr. Brightside just played really quietly and politely, it does seem to be a little bit of a, it's a weird situation. One thing that I'm thinking that I might need to solve, because I just looked at my calendar and I've got, like, over the next few months, couple of months, I've got sort of 10, 12 gigs coming in, and I'm just considering like which of these are going to be a scenario which is going to be like this in-ear type situation where it's kind of a gig where, don't get me wrong, it can be kind of fun and it's playing guitar for money still, which is kind of nice, but is the most jobbish feeling thing that I do. Do you know what I mean? Where you're playing with in-ears and no amp on stage. That is, for me, the most it ever feels like I'm just doing this for a job. It's how I would describe it, and some of the fun part of it doesn't seem to be there, although I was still having plenty of fun at points. But it's kind of like, it just, are these ears in properly? And if they're not in, you hear basically nothing. It's just a bit of a weird one. So that's my question, and I'd love to hear from some of you guys. I know some of you guys will not be playing live or anything like that, but I know that there's definitely some of you that are as well. I've got absolutely no issue with like using modeler live. I've got absolutely no issue with using amp live, but I don't particularly like when it's just no sound on stage at all. That to me is a bit of a scenario which is actually not as fun. I don't know if that's the same for any of you guys, but it's one of those things where I just feel like it's a venue that's putting on a gig in a place where there shouldn't really be a gig, and then you're asking everyone to bring these volumes down to levels which are potentially achievable for some types of bands, but also don't really sound particularly right when it's a rock band. So if you think like 100 decibels versus 85 decibels, which is what you're aiming for, 85 decibels in this scenario, is not actually like it's a logarithmic scale, right? So 85 decibels is this much quieter than 100 decibels. I'll flash it up because I don't know off the top of my head, but I think every 10 decibels is like a doubling of sound. So 100 decibels is twice as loud as 90 decibels. So 85 is less than half the volume. You get what I mean? So anyway, I don't know. I've definitely been in scenarios where it's just like you're playing with people, you're like, why are you playing so loud? So I get the flip side of it. But at the same time, if you're going to have a venue where you're booking bands out and saying, right, have a band, this is your perfect day, we're going to charge you $5,000 for the venue, then I do think, should you maybe be considering, well, get some soundproofing or something so that you can actually have the band playing at a normal volume? Because these tend to be these massive sort of barns. I mean, yesterday it was literally just a barn, like not even trying to be anything else. It was just like a newly built barn in a field, and you think, yeah, it doesn't feel quite as fun as I think live gigs should for me, when there's not some amount of stage volume. I love it when there's a bass amp, when there's a guitar amp, and when there's a drummer. When there's just drums and no bass and guitar amps on stage, that to me feels a little bit weird still. Electric drums, just direct bass and direct guitar, it's kind of okay. But again, it just starts to feel very much like a job, and very much like, obviously you are just paid to be there, but a bit more difficult to just have fun and let go a bit, because you're kind of like, well, I've got to make sure these ears are in, otherwise this just sounds like almost nothing. Let me know your thoughts. Worth saying though that looking at some of the numbers about some of this stuff, like if 100 decibels is like considerably worse for your health and hearing over time, maybe this quieter band thing is the way forward in terms of us not going deaf. So there are trade-offs with this. Also, like looking at some of the video and how it sounded from out front, like it doesn't sound bad, it's just, I guess, quite quiet. Equally, you know, I've been, as I guess we all have, so many gigs where it's just like painfully loud, where it's kind of like, well, maybe this is a trade-off that is worthwhile. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever played with an electric drum kit? Looking back, for certain songs, like the electric drum kit actually sounded pretty good. In other songs it sounded a little bit less good, but it's one of those things where if you're expecting the bass and the guitar to go, you know, silent, then having a chat with the drummer. Are you also expecting the drummer to go to an electric kit? Is this the way forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Cheers to Charge for having me. I had a good time, mostly, but I'm thinking maybe if I'm going to be doing a few more of these types of gigs, I should spend more than £40 on the way that I hear the whole gig, i.e. in-ear monitors. So if you've got some decent in-ear monitors, feel free to fill up the comments with some suggestions for stuff that works well for that. Would you do an in-ear gig, or would you just say, look, I need to use an amp, or I'm not going to do it? I think this is the thing for most working guitarists these days. You're going to have to be able to do this sort of gig where there just won't be an amp, so it's going to feel a bit more like work, maybe.